What classifies Grendel as a monster? Is it one universal view, or does it differ from person to person? Through the eyes of Grendel himself and the Thanes, Grendel is viewed very differently. The views of the Thanes are completely swayed by the Shaper's predictions and ideas. He is seen as a monster because he is an outcast, cursed by the rules of the Shaper's hideous fable. Grendel strongly believes that if the Shaper had portrayed him as a being of light instead of darkness, he wouldn't be seen as a monster in their eyes. Also, because the Shaper is influential to the Thanes and Grendel as well, Grendel believes the story the Shaper told of an ancient feud. Grendel was the dark side, the terrible race god cursed. He believes the character trait of a monster has been instilled in him from the beginning of time. However, he doesn't see himself as a bloodthirsty monster like the Thanes perceive. He may snatch a guard and smash him on a tree, but his stomach turned at the thought of eating him. What is the correlation between the human's negative views and the way Grendel views himself? Initially, Grendel was true to himself and defiant regardless of how his mother treated him and what she told him about their past. Also, when Hrothgar's people couldn't understand him and then proceeded to try to kill him, Grendel was confused, yet didn't try to implement change to his character. The Shaper, however, led Grendel to the conclusion that he was the reason for the negative views placed upon him in the society. The Shaper reshapes the world, and by changing men's minds, he makes the best of it. Grendel believed him. Such was the power of the Shaper's heart. He saw no reason as to why he shouldn't believe what he said. Eventually, because of the views of the people around him, Grendel could feel it all around him, that invisible presence, eyes of 1,000 snakes. He became self-conscious and confused. So, can an entire community or group of people change our views about ourselves, or is it specific people whose views hurt us more? How is Grendel's language and views shaped by his interactions? Grendel's personality changes throughout the story as he is affected by the beings within his surroundings. From his childhood through his adulthood, he felt distance from his mother as she occasionally stared at Grendel as if to consume him. Her strange eyes burned into him. This separation causes him to distance himself from life and continually have internal battles with who he is. His interactions with the humans, which he intended to be peaceful, instead, for example, consisted of the king snatching an axe from the man beside him, and without any warning, he hurled it at him. Because Grendel faced this abuse without reason, he shifted his mentality to, the world resists me, and I resisted the world. The world is all pointless accident. I exist, nothing else. Consistent with each of his interactions, his sympathetic nature for humans is broken down. What does this say about his willingness to forgive and overcome? In Grendel, what factor draws the line between good and evil? Good and evil is defined very differently between Grendel and his counterparts. Grendel thinks the Thanes are evil, and the Thanes think he is evil. This difference in views is simply because of their differing lifestyles. Grendel despises how, by some lunatic theory, they throw on golden rings, old swords, and braided helmets. He shakes with rage. He cannot understand how the armor in battles could mean so much to them and bring them joy. He also, on multiple occasions, has encountered how they talked nothing, stupidities, their soft voices groping like hands. Grendel stepped on something fleshy. It was a man. They'd cut his throat. Why the Thanes would cut one of their people's own throats without the purpose of consumption labels the humans as evil to Grendel. On the contrary, the Thanes could not understand Grendel's purpose in eating their livestock, the sounds he makes that sound threatening, and his overall demeanor. So, does Grendel and the Thanes' uncomfortableness towards the others' actions contribute to bias on the statute of good and evil?
What drives Grendel to continue to watch the humans? Grendel continues to watch the humans because Grendel gets to inquire and learn about something he doesn't know or understand. It was mentioned in the beginning of the book that when Grendel would ask his mother about why they lived in the cave and how they came to live there, his mother would say, "Don't ask," to which Grendel would reason with himself that she'll tell me in time, which she never did. But this whole interaction lends to my theory that Grendel watches the humans so much, not only because they interest him, but also because for the first time in his life, instead of waiting to be let in on some awesome secret he'll never know, he gets to investigate into his curiosities. Why is Grendel so reluctant to harm figures of innocence? I believe that Grendel is so reluctant to harm figures of innocence because, on some level, he feels jealous of their obliviousness. Anyway, he is jealous of the way that they can be content and find happiness by seeing all life without observing it, in a way that Grendel never could due to his nihilistic view on the world. This would explain Grendel's fascinated hatred of Wealhtheow when she is introduced, as she exudes innocence and naivety, as evident in the words of Grendel as he explains that she is as innocent as dawn on winter hills, and that she surrendered herself with the dignity of a sacrificial virgin. What does it mean to be human in Grendel's eyes? To Grendel, a sense of connectivity to others is what makes someone human. Grendel feels as though he has no one to relate to or connect with because the only people he finds interest in see him as a figure of evil. Maybe this is why he launched an attack on Hart Hall as some sort of revenge for not understanding him, a way to punish the men for not connecting with him. As he executed his attack on the Thanes, Grendel thinks, I was a new focus for the clutter of space I stood in. If the world had once imploded on the tree where I waited, trapped and full of pain, it now blasted outward, away from me, screeching terror, as if he was taking the pain and embarrassment from the tree situation and using it to fuel his crusade. Although he feels some joy in his killings, he states, but also as never before I was alone, which indicates that although his revenge is fulfilling, he still doesn't feel connected like he wants to, which is where Unferth comes into play. I assume Grendel's disconnect from humanity and longing for companionship is why he does to Unferth what he does, so that someone would have to endure some of the degradation that he does on a daily basis. In this twisted way, Grendel has a way to force someone to connect with him and thus feel more human than monster. Some evidence of their connection comes in their exchange where Unferth states, except in the life of a hero, the whole world's meaningless. The hero sees values beyond what's possible. That's the nature of a hero. It kills him, of course, ultimately, but it makes the whole struggle of humanity worthwhile. To which Grendel agrees with the statement and says, and breaks up the boredom. If you think about it, this interaction is his first real conversation with anyone in the book, and both he and Unferth find a common ground on a subject which indicates connection. What is the significance of Grendel's mother's presence throughout the book? The significance of the presence of Grendel's mother is to remind the reader of where Grendel began, with his mother acting as a primal figure as shown when she moved back and forth like a bear behind me, stirred up by the smell. She represents the beginning of Grendel's journey. Now, don't get me wrong. Grendel, in some essence, is relatively the same, but his thought process and the way he views certain subjects, such as humanity and fate, change significantly throughout the book. So the mentioning of his mother brings the reader back to the roots and serves as a gentle reminder that Grendel is still a monster, as well as serving as a basis for comparison to show how far Grendel's mentation has evolved.